Well, hello, friends. I am so excited and grateful that you have chosen to spend your midday on Wednesday with us. My name is Danielle Fanfair. I have the privilege of serving as co-president along with Reverend Clare Loughrige of the International Enneagram Association Great Lakes chapter that we have lovingly renamed Anywhere Near a Lake chapter. So if you are near a lake, you belong with us. We belong together. So what I want to do is I want to share with you all some, oh, no problem, Sarah. Sarah said, sorry to be off camera. Hey, whatever you got to do, Sarah. What I want to do is share a little bit about what we have going on in our chapter. I want to encourage everyone to sign up for our newsletter, our Ennea News. If you have not already, I'm going to show you all the most recent Ennea newsletter. It's beautiful, and it comes to your inbox once a month, and it just lets you know about all of the events that we have going on. And it especially gives you a little preview of what to expect, how to prepare for our midday cafes that happen every month on Wednesdays and the third Wednesday of the month. And it gives you a rundown of the 2022 events that are happening in our chapter. So we got the Enneagram and Angels workshop with our board member, Rosemary Horwitz. And if you've ever talked with Rosemary and learned from her, she is a hoot and an expert. And so you get to laugh and be filled with glee and learn at the same time. We also have from the Enneagram Institute of Ohio multiple offerings. The Be Yourself Retreat is a hybrid workshop, and it is based in the spiritual rhythms of the Enneagram curriculum by our very own Clare. And so it's a pay what you like. And I love the inclusivity of this offering. And so if you have hit a paywall with your Enneagram study and it's hard for you to imagine being able to attend these things, well, you got something right here that is going to enrich you, and every investment you make will be returned to you with every moment that you spend. So that is October 29th. And I'm going to put all these links in the chat as well. What else? Well, we got Catherine Grant, who's going to be doing an advanced Enneagram workshop. Rosemary has her monthly Enneagram group. My name is Danielle, and that's me. I'm teaching Confusion and Clarity's BFF training. It's a way to understand your friends and your friendships differently than you ever have before. A lot of friends are headed towards friend divorce, and they're able to get aligned after learning each other's Ennea type and being able to see each other's essences in action. We also see Catherine is hosting a Sell the Wine Dark Seed. So when you email us at IEA, I'll put our email address in the chat. When you email us, we'll sign you up for the newsletter. Then we got some trainings going on here. I am teaching learn how to teach the Enneagram with a diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility lens to it. And so I've learned so much about how the wisdom of the Enneagram can unite us and how we're more alike than we are different. And we have these wonderful transferable skills that our lived experience provides us, and the Enneagram is so helpful in exploring and expanding those things. There's also a hybrid and in-person Motions of the Soul training. I had taken this. This was my first certification, completely changed the way that I coach, the way that I counsel, the way that I consult. And so I highly, highly recommend anyone who's serious about using the Enneagram in any capacity to experience this. And we also have our President Emeritus, Dr. Jerry Wagner, teaching his Enneagram Spectrum training and certification. I've also taken this one and highly recommended and love the psychological foundation that Dr. Wagner comes from and the mastery that we'll gain from these things. And so I'm going to drop this in the chat as well. The other thing that I want you guys to do is make sure that you are subscribing to the YouTube channel so that you hear something that you just loved. You don't have to worry about paraphrasing it perfectly or even badly. You can just go to our YouTube channel, share that link with your friends and say, hey, you got to come with me to this thing next time, and you got to watch what I just learned. So all of these links are going in the chat. I'm so grateful and excited that you're here, and I'm going to throw it back to you, Clare.
Well, Danielle, I just think that if you're teaching something on a BFF, I have to be there. So I'm getting that on my calendar right now. I want to do the BFF stuff. Also loving what Catherine and Rosemary are offering. So those are just great new ways. You can see that our events we're building up.
Oh, yeah. And Claire, I'm sorry. I just also want to make sure that folks know that we do have a Facebook and an Instagram page. So if you're not following us on those two platforms, please do, and share, like, subscribe, share your content, respond, engage, all that good stuff. Sorry.
Yeah. And just know that we are volunteer-led board. And so one of the things that I just want to say is sometimes I get an email right before we're getting started and someone says, the link is not working. So I just got one of those, and I want to say, we're so sorry about that. And always let us know when we have let our incompetency show. And so not Danielle, but me, never Danielle, but me. And then I want to say that Sean is not in the room yet. And so we're a little concerned that he may have thought we were Central Time Zone. And it's happened to us before on other occasions. And so we just want to say, what do you guys want to do till he gets here? So I sent a couple of extra emails. We were even emailing this morning about the content he was bringing. So I know he was really excited to be with you all. He's in the room. Yay. Yeah. Okay. Very, very good. I think he's in the room. Do you see him? Yes. 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 Beautiful. Hello, Sean. Welcome. Can you hear us? Welcome, Sean. We're getting on the earbuds. Aren't you glad that we have ways we can do this? So let me just say that we're really excited to host Sean Palmer, who's the author of this fabulous book, if you don't have it yet, Speaking by the Numbers, Enneagram Wisdom for Teachers, Pastors, and Communicators. And he also wrote one of the devotionals for 40 days on being a 3 for IVP. And he is the teaching pastor at Ecclesia Houston, one of America's most innovative and vibrant multi-site churches serving a predominance of millennials and young adults. So Sean, we are really happy to have you in the house and in this beautiful space that we call the Zoomcast, and that you, as an Enneagram leading with style, I won't say, that you were able to fit us in to your very, very beautifully meaningful, creative life. And so we're just so grateful. And we'd love for you to say hello to everybody before we start with a practice.
Hello, it is great to be with you. And as has happened with me before, I get my time zones messed up. So I finish something and I thought, oh, I've got more time than I thought before the next thing. And then I was like, oh, that's noon Eastern, not Central, where I live here in Texas. So I'm glad to be with you. I'm glad I was able to make it and look forward to our time together.
Wonderful. So I think even just for all of us to take a breath, and maybe we'll even follow the wisdom of Jerome Libba, who taught us how to activate both rest and digest. So if we breathe in at a 1-to-2 ratio, you can choose 4 to 8, 5 to 10, whichever way, and then follow by a swallow. And so we'll begin that way, just to, honor the fact that we've all come from somewhere and we want to be all here best we can. We want to bring ourselves into this space and receive the gifts that are going to be available right here, right now. So at a 1-to-2 ratio, I choose the 4-to-8. With a swallow. And then just notice how much of you is in the room. Notice that without judgment. And see if you can't be here now more fully. And when you want to engage the screen, come back to us and welcome these people you've never met before or friends that you're glad to see again. And then to our teacher for this next several minutes, we welcome you, Sean. We welcome your story and all that has created what turned into a book. We know that people classically write the book they need. And so I wonder about that. Is it true?
Yeah, it is true on a number of different levels. And I'll tell you about why that is in a couple of minutes. And as Claire mentioned, I'm a 3 on the Enneagram, which kind of means that I don't actually have to have a reason to write a book, except, attention and or money or both, like I can do that without any great purpose. But I had this experience. I have been in local church ministry in the pastorate for almost 26 years, so over a quarter of a century. And I make my living speaking to audiences, both inside the church, outside the church. I do diversity, equity, inclusion training. I work with local city governments. I coach speakers, all of those kinds of things in my work life. And so I have the benefit of being in a community here in Houston that is very Enneagram informed. Most of the people, if you've been around our church community, know the Enneagram somewhat. And so I was in the middle. Well, I gave a lesson several years ago, and it was about choices. Fundamentally about, you don't get to choose everything in your life, but you do have some degree of agency about your life and the things that you get to choose. And so the ramp up, the beginning of that entire message was about choices. And one of our community members, who I love very much, she's very dear to me, she identifies as an 8 on the Enneagram. And it would take someone who is an aggressive type to say this kind of thing. And she comes to me and says, that was the most Enneagram 3 message I have ever heard. And so I wouldn't change anything about it in terms of its content, but it did give me a moment of pause, because I started thinking about, oh my goodness, it has been years and years and years of me doing this. And what if, unbeknownst to me, I had spent the last decades talking to myself, And what if all of this that I had learned and all the training that I had done around the Enneagram really stopped with my own self-awareness, being aware of the people who were close to me, my wife, my daughters, people I worked with, that kind of awareness, but I hadn't extended it out to other people. And this fundamental idea came to me is like, what if people like you and I, who know the Enneagram fairly well, who are continually learning, deepening our knowledge of the Enneagram, what if we are teaching the Enneagram in ways that portrays our knowledge of the Enneagram without practicing our knowledge of the Enneagram? So what then can I do to take what we have learned and what we are learning about personality structure, how we're made, how we seek to connect, where we find disconnection and dislocation, how do we get what we want, what do we do when we don't get what we want, all of those things that we're trying to take off of automatic pilot and be more intentional. What if we move that knowledge over into the realm of public speaking, communication? And that's where the book comes from. And so what I want to suggest for Enneagram teachers, and I'm sure all of you are approached by people either formally or informally regarding your insights, your theories about personality, we actually use that in presentation to honor the people who are in our midst. So my master's degree is in what's called homiletics, which is a fancy word for preaching. So I know in a group like this, many of us know plenty about the Enneagram, but we may want to be more intentional about porting over what we know of the Enneagram into spaces where we are teaching and talking with others. And here is the reality of our situation. Whether it's with a partner, a coworker, a child, a niece, a nephew, an aunt, a cousin, we're always communicating. And what I tried to do in the book is put down some guidelines, some ways to help us do that better. So here's what I did. I saw a commercial about Febreze. And so if you've seen this commercial about Febreze, Febreze is selling you a product to solve a problem that you can't know that you have. That problem is nose blindness. Have you seen these commercials? Like, raise your hand if you've seen these commercials. That basically is that the anxiety that your house smells, and you have become so acclimated to it, it's become such a part of like your daily life that you can't smell it. You're blind to the smell. And we all know that this is a problem, because you don't have to live too terribly long to have gone to someone's house and be like, did you notice that their house smelled? like you know that there are people that don't notice. But what if that's me? So what does that commercial, and really all commercials, want you to do? They want you to think that there's a problem. You can't know that there's a problem. Most of us aren't going to ask our friends and neighbors, does my house smell? And if there's someone that we really trust and we feel we can have that level of vulnerability, we will. But we want them to think that there's a problem. We want to feel anxious. They want us to feel anxious about it. And then they want us to do something. They want us to buy Febreze to solve a problem that we can't possibly know that we have. And that is the structure of communication. But thinking and feeling and doing are also the three intelligence centers of the Enneagram. And so we're all thinking, we're all feeling, we're all doing something. We're enacting something in our body. So what happens then if we overlay what we know about communication with what we know about the Enneagram? Well, that's where Hornavians come in, because they are solving the problem. They're answering the question, how do we get what we want? So you all know this. We all come into the world more or less. Some of us have early trauma. There's passed down trauma. Wonderful book. It didn't start with you if you've never read it. But we all come into the world fairly balanced with thinking, feeling, and doing. And then something happens to us pretty early on in our journey, maybe from our family of origin, primary caregivers. And we say, that part that I just stepped up with, that thinking, that feeling, or doing, that doesn't work here. So I'm going to pull back on my thinking center or my feeling center or my doing center because it doesn't get rewarded and it may have actually been bruised. And that's part of how our personality gets structured. And we end up in one of our numbers, which is in a triad, which is how we connect with the world, but it's also in a Hornadian, which is how do we get what we want? So what I try to do in the book is say, and I use the language aggressive types for 1s, 3s, and 7s, dependent or reactive types for 1s, 2s, and 6s, and withdrawing types for 4s, 5s, and 9s. And what that means is this is the way that we make our way through the world. So I want to talk a little bit about speech making, and then we can dialogue a little bit. Most of us are taking the Enneagram into a particular space, and we need to understand that when we enter into that space, like I was doing, we are speaking from our number. I speak like a 3 speaks. And if I'm not careful, all of my discourses will be aimed at people who hear like a 3 hears. So the first task of any speaker is to gain a hearing. And how do we gain a hearing? We gain a hearing by taking our hearer and who she is seriously. Gaining a hearing is about establishing trust, about empathy, about understanding the world that people are coming from and they're living in. What are the tensions that they are navigating, which are not going to be the tensions that I'm navigating. So on a given weekend, I may speak to 1,000 people, and some percentage of those folks are going to have very similar stories to mine, but not most of them. So I have to really know about how other people, other types, get what they want in the world, and how they may have an intelligence center that is very feeling. They connect to the world through feeling, but they are disconnected from their thinking center. And in the book, we describe thinking, feeling, and doing. My best stab at that. So I'll give you an example. A couple of weeks ago in a staff meeting, I was doing a teaching for our group. One of the young women in the group asked a question about it after it was pretty pointed and pretty direct. And I didn't have a problem with the question. I thought the question was fair. I asked her a couple of days later because I wanted to be helpful in her getting to the answer that she wanted or some resolution. And I asked her, why did you ask that question? And she said, I don't know. And that's the kind of thing that happens to many of us when we allow our thinking, or rather when we allow our feeling to do our thinking, right? I'm the opposite. Because I am feeling dominant and feeling repressed as a 3, I can absolutely run over people and not notice that I've hurt them or hurt their feelings. Well, how does that impact the way that I communicate? Because it's definitely impacting the way that I communicate, whether people feel judged, if they feel threatened, if I come across more aggressively than I want. And that's going to inhibit me finding a hearing. So one of the places you start as a communicator is looking for the places where one of your intelligence center has just gone on walkabout. It's out there doing its own thing, and you're not paying attention to the places that you're repressed, and how people, especially in the place where you're repressed, come to what you are hearing and thinking and saying. So that's the first thing, which leads to the second thing, is that communication is about the hearer. So let's say that you are working on a teaching for a group of people. What are you going to do about the fives in that room if you are doing dominant and they are thinking dominant, right? Because if you get up and say, we're going to go out and do this, we're going to conquer this, we're going to solve this problem, and you've got fives in the room who are saying, like, is this a problem? Like, where's the data? Like, if you say there are 150,000 homeless people in our zip code, and we're going to make sure that no one else is homeless, someone in that thinking dominance is going to say, are there really 50,000 homeless people? Because let's not waste a lot of energy that they don't have to give, solving a problem that does not exist. So instead of thinking, what do I want to communicate? The thought then becomes, how do I communicate for everyone? You have known people. I'll give you an example. There's a nationally known speaker I heard about 12 years ago, and I was at this conference, and he starts, and a friend of mine is sitting on the other end of the row. So I sent him a text, and I said, I will bet you lunch that he cries before this is over, which is totally something a 3, 7, or 8 would say, right? Like, get out of here with your feelings, right? But it's also true, I knew this, because he cries at every one of his talks. And to do it every time to certain people, I mean, it could be as genuine for him as anything in the world. And I would not doubt or have suspicion around that. For certain types of your hearers, that is going to read as manipulation, as overly feeling, and they're going to be saying, get yourself together. Like, pull it together. You can't possibly be this teary every time, because there are people like me who are teary none of the time. So center the hearer rather than yourself as a communicator. And then the third thing I think is really important is that we actually do perform speech acts. And so folks ask me all of the time, how do you put together talks, especially when I'm doing a keynote or plenary session at a large gathering? And I do this every week as well. Because of the way that I put together my communication pieces, I put together a storyboard. I teach the storyboard to my speaking clients. And I write at the top, thinking, feeling, doing. And I want to make sure that there's enough expository knowledge in this message that certain types who need that gains trust with them, that they get the answers to the questions, that I'm overcoming possible objections as we're going along. So it sounds like, now I know what some of you are thinking, or some people would say this, or the argument against it. So I'm helping them to trust me. But as I'm doing that piece, I'm also helping folks who are thinking repressed think. And this happens with each of the intelligence centers, that I know that you are repressed. And what I mean by repressed, when I talk about thinking, feeling, and doing, and 3 intelligence centers, what I mean by repressed is not that you don't do it, not that people don't do it. My wife identifies as a 1 on the Enneagram. She was very upset when someone told her that she was thinking repressed, because she is much smarter than I am. And that's no secret to anyone who knows us both. But what I mean by repression is the energy it costs you. So my friend Suzanne Dion, she and I taught a class for the Shift Network this summer on the Enneagram and relationships. And she calls Hornavians energy flow. And I love that. It costs you more energy. It doesn't mean that you can't do it. So centering that hearer, performing a speech act. So in that speech act, exposition, I've got to have that for people who are thinking dominant, and I've got to have it for people who are thinking repressed. I've got to have action items for people who need something to do, somewhere for all of that energy to go. I work alongside a guy who is an 8, and he's the other primary communicator in our community here. As a matter of fact, he's the founder of this community. And I told him 2 years ago, you are just wearing everybody out. Like, there's a new way to heal the world every week. And we haven't even finished the last thing, which he took under advisement, but it hit him 3 weeks ago when someone came and said, I have to leave this church. And he was like, why? He says, like, you're just wearing me out. Like it's just like it just did not have the energy to keep up. But for folks who need that, you have to have something to do, a direction to point, and folks who struggle with it, we need to have on ramps for them to do things to the level that their energy, because what we're trying to do is balance out that stool of thinking, feeling, and doing that gets imbalanced. And the same is true for feeling. Like, people like me need to be invited into feeling deeply, to caring about others when we'd rather just move on to the next thing, but particularly to care about ourselves in a way that actually matters and to spend time in it. And so if someone does too much of that, I check out. But if you don't do it at all, then there's this piece of me that's crucial, that goes unexplored. And the beauty of it is, as my teacher Suzanne says, like, the part of you that's repressed, that took a step back from your family of origin or early in childhood, or maybe in your early adulthood, the beauty is, like, that's the purest part of you. It's the most undeveloped, but it's the purest. And so it takes a lot of courage to take that out of the box and to let it explore the world. And one of the great beauties of the Enneagram is that as we teach and guide and coach other people, we get to be witness and to bear witness to this beauty that emerges in them that has been so pristinely held. So that's basically kind of the arc of the book. At the end, I give just some helpful tools for navigating that in the real world, in your own business, in your coaching, like how you can do that to help bring up people's repressed centers. All through the book, there are sample talks where I just took a stab. So I was speaking at a college for their incoming freshmen, and I said, well, this is a time where kids are really exploring what they want to do. So what if I just leaned heavily into that intelligence center? One for a group of mayors and police chiefs and fire chiefs who were struggling after everything that happened with George Floyd to understand the racial divisions in their city. Here's a way to think about that. So each one is kind of weighted. I wouldn't suggest you do that in your own communication, but I wanted to give people a lens to say what it might look like. So for me, the best insights I get around the Enneagram are with talking with people. So Claire, can we do that now for a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. And so even for those that don't do talks, they're in communication with people in their everyday life. And maybe even this is giving us a way to say, oh, that might be the challenge I'm having, as an assertive type with this withdrawing type. And maybe I need to try to craft some new language. So I want to open it up to others who maybe it will go right to this giving a talk. I know that Danielle had a question heading into this about the corporate setting. And so if you want to come on, Danielle, and ask that question, you and Sage together, dynamic duo.
Yeah. Hey, Sean, and greetings from down the street because I'm in Houston too.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. So my question is, when we're engaging this in a corporate setting, I always have to balance the accelerated. Well, I always welcome the accelerated intimacy that happens when people start talking about personality types and wounding, repression. How do you help them when you talk to corporate groups? How do you help them transfer this new skill that they're building of really acknowledging and allowing themselves? How do you help them transfer that skill to their role?
Yeah. So one of the things, especially for like middle managers and upper management, that's such a great question, is that if you manage people, one of the super skill that we all need to develop is noticing, right? Noticing how people respond to their work, how they respond to people in their environment. And when it comes to the corporate world, like there is more so than in my setting. Hey, you're here. We're making a transaction. We pay you to do these things. Do them. It can be a much colder environment. So I think first of all, managers and leaders have to be noticers of how people are actually behaving. And so I'm working with a group in New England, and it's their management who came to know the Enneagram and asking me if I could work with them. I said, none of the people in your organization actually have to know the Enneagram if you know it. Because it's not magic. It's a way of knowing and a way of seeing. And then asking questions, allowing people that you work for, when they do, like, tell me more about what you were thinking when this happened. How are you feeling? To begin to ask questions like, what do you think about this? And allowing people to really explore. And this is part of the training, to know when people are actually thinking or when they're just talking. So I worked with my office partner for several years, was a 9. And I asked him, what's the best way for me to get feedback from you? Now, I knew that he was a 9. He knew that he was a 9. And he told me, ask me and give me a day or two to think about. Right. So he could actually figure out what he personally believed rather than just going with what he felt might cause the least amount of conflict. So asking good questions, making space to hear people. This takes time to really get to know people and to know their motivations on a profound level. Some corporations have space for that and others don't. But I think, Danielle, if you were to do that in your setting, that people notice and they go like, she kind of gets me on a different level than other people. And in all of that, you don't ever have to use the word Enneagram or personality type. The more you know about the Enneagram, the clearer the questions to ask become to you. Like when you start to get a sense, like, oh, I kind of get a sense, I don't want to type people, but I kind of get a sense there's a lot of 7 energy here or a lot of 4 energy here. Like even with my daughter, who is a 4, I asked her, and she's 18 and in college, right? But it just dawned on me to ask her like 6 months ago, hey, when you go up to your room and listen to sad music all night, do you want us to come get you or to leave you alone? And she said, both. Right? And so it's just taking time to ask the right questions. And I think that's true in I just don't know a better way than asking questions. And there's a philosophy of like 7 layers deep. If you can ask the same question 7 different ways, someone will finally tell you what they're thinking and feeling about
That's
that.
so good. No, that's your response has been more than adequate. I love that. And it's aligned with what I'm practicing and teaching. So you just took me to the next level. I appreciate it.
Good, I'm glad. Thank you.
Which layer did he take you to, Danielle?
It's definitely sub 5, maybe 6. We're down there. We're down there.
Yeah, yeah. I wonder, I'm not seeing anybody else's hand raised at the moment, so I'll go ahead and say, I lead with Enneagram style 3. I have a dismissed childlike self that is the 6. The 6 became very 6y during COVID, and I allowed lots of questions to slow me down, right? And not just try to get through COVID, get our congregation through COVID, all of that kind of thing, but allowed the public health department to ask good questions, allowed so there was all of that happening. And what I noticed, and I could be completely wrong, but I did notice that most people's self-preservation instinct was on top during COVID, in whatever way it manifested itself, whether, it was power and control, security and survival, or approval and affection. So coming out of COVID, I'm feeling a little bit off my ability to well, let's just get really blunt. To be patient with not going ahead and moving forward after years of letting the thinking center be in charge, letting the doing center and caring for the most vulnerable among us, right? And certainly the heart center caring about people. And it does feel like we are caught in a loop that we haven't recovered from yet. So, I'm crafting my language continually. I'm recrafting my language continually, right? Because what I'd like to do is go full on Sicilian. Come on, let's be aware of what we've learned here and let go of those things that no longer work, and allow the demolition to be accepted and rebuild in a new way. And yet, of course, life doesn't work that way. So I get to practice lots of breathing, lots of asking my thinking center, lots of asking my instincts before I just want to go out and connect with the world again. And so anyway, so I just want to name my pain to you, Sean. And what are your thoughts around what we've just lived through and rebuilding a future that works?
Yeah, I have so many thoughts, and they're all over this place. I don't know if there's anything coherent. I did realize it during COVID, that everyone had a chance to live with their choices, and that stirred up a lot of things for people. Like, oh, I actually did choose this partner. I actually did raise my kids this way. Like, we bought this house. And when you don't have any place to go to distract you from all of that, all of that comes up in ways that can be really healing. You can create space, but can also misfire in a lot of ways. And what we're noticing is that coming out of COVID, for the folks that I'm with, that hardly anyone wants to do anything. And I thought going in, this would be a great reset. Like, I'm tired of taking teenagers here and there and all over the place. I'm going to get to sit down and really examine what we want to do and what we don't want to do, what's just in a cultural or community pressure. But if you look at the numbers, like, giving is down to just about every nonprofit. Attendance is down at events. I think sports are the only ones not really suffering from that. Military recruitment is down. I think that for the first year in forever, the Navy and Army are going to be way under their recruitment goals. I found myself back in May going to Puerto Rico to teach on the book and having to go to Malibu right after, which should be like, I'm going from incredible beach to incredible beach, right? Like nearly having like a panic attack because I'm so accustomed to going places and being with people. And Claire, the reality is, I think we won't know what COVID did to us for maybe another decade. Because what I feel like has happened is when we had some freedom, everyone dove right back into their compulsions, or they enhanced their compulsion. That's why alcohol use is up, drug use is up. We just don't know how to deal healthily through all of that.
Bless you.
So thank you. So I'm not even really sure. And I think probably depends on where you live and what the restrictions and holdbacks were in your local community. That's going to be pretty varied as well. I know how it affected me, and I am very, unless I'm teaching in my job, I have a lot of 9 energy. Like I can go either way with most things. Like, but in my personal life, I have a self-preserving 3 drive that is pretty strong, and that didn't recede in COVID. It accelerated because I then felt like, oh, I am really the only one that I can depend on.
Sean, we have a question from Lori, and then Rosemary's hand is also raised. Lori, go ahead.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you so much. This has been awesome. So I just really appreciate learning from you. And then Claire, listening to you, it was bringing up like some stuff for me. Like I'm an 8, and I, when I speak and when I teach, I really do speak from my 8 perspective. And what was coming up for me as I was learning from you is like how, I think the question is, how do we stay authentic to who we are? Because when I hear you saying, okay, because I do come with action and a lot of like gusto and vision when I speak. And I do feel like that my feeling repression, like if I try to bring that forward, it feels manipulative to me as the speaker. So I'm just, to hear you say that, like I was just chuckling because I'm like, oh yeah, because I know it's needed. I know I need to bring a little more feeling and authenticity of feeling, but I don't want to feel like I'm manipulating my crowd, my hearers.
Right. And that's the great danger, right? Like, and I'm well aware of that danger with the books. Like, am I helping people be more manipulative? And so like that's not a question I didn't think through. So how to stay authentic goes back to the third thing I listed about speech acts are performative, but they're not performances. So, and what I mean by that is that you don't have to feel it in the moment for it to be an authentic feeling. And you don't have to communicate that feeling in the moment for it to not be an authentic feeling. So for instance, because I'm in a large church community, like before COVID, there were times where I had to speak 5 times on a Sunday. My hearer deserves something that's helpful to them each time, whether I'm tired of it or not. Then I don't want to put on a show, but like if something's meaningful to me personally, like just talk about the Feeling Intelligence Center, I can communicate how important it is to me with feeling without feeling it in the moment. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what makes it authentic. Is that because it's true, even though I may not be expressing the depth of that truth like that. So I would never say to anyone like, you need to fake cry at this moment. Like that's what drove me crazy about the speaker that I mentioned. But there are ways as a communicator with posture and voice and tempo, intonation, to talk about how something really is meaningful to you. Like to go back and connect to why that's meaningful to you, to be emotionally tethered to it, without emotionally vomiting. As a matter of fact, I actually caution people to, like, most of the time, this is not 100% true, but much of the time, if you can't talk about it without getting emotional in a group like that at the population level, not at the friend level or therapist level or coach level, but at the population level, you probably aren't ready to talk about it publicly yet. Because if you can, the point is to bear witness to the truth without reliving it.
Really helpful. Thank you. Yeah, really good.
Rosemary, what was your question?
Can you unmute, Rosemary?
Yeah, it was pretty much answered, I think. Just talking about coming from my father was a speech professor. He opened up the speech department at Marquette University a million years ago. He's been gone a while, but I cut my teeth on many of the things you're speaking about today. And he was always about getting to know your audience and getting to, be clear. Sometimes you hear going down to the lowest level. I don't love that. That's not where I come from, because I guess I'm trying to figure that piece out a little bit. But I always feel if I'm coming from a balanced place within me, whatever, of course, our number is going to show who we are because we're the vessel, But one time this lady said to me, "Are you a 9?" And I'm not. I'm a 7 with an 8 wing, but I kind of have a dark 7. I have a strong 4, and I'm very serious. I always say underneath this dumb blonde is a very brilliant brunette. But I am serious, and I have that within me, a big part of that. So when I'm trying to understand when you have a big group, because I am starting to go into corporate more. And that doesn't bother me. Changing language from spiritual to corporate is easy for me. What is difficult is when you have a big group like you're talking about. Mm-hmm. And you can't possibly please all of those people all of the time. And yet you want to be sensitive. So what I do is come from a place of alignment. I do my best to be aligned in my head, heart, and gut, and come from that and hope that expresses out, the best I can, So my question, I'm kind of just free associating here with you, but what's your best bottom line when you have a big group other than what you just said, to tether to what is meaningful, because that's what speaks to me when I'm listening to someone. That's what I want. So then I try to do unto others. Is that?
Yeah, thanks, Rosemary. I appreciate that. And so I actually do cover that a little bit in the book about being aligned, being healthy yourself, because obviously the more alignment and health and balance you have that you are warehousing within yourself, like the less work it is to do the other things, like to make sure that you're addressing all 3 centers, because that becomes more natural. It's not inevitable, but it becomes more natural because it just doesn't feel complete to you. So that's like one of the first places to start, is with that sort of alignment. But then also sometimes, and depending on the group and what your deliverables are, that can guide you into how you approach it, especially in the corporate world, or they say we want you to do when a corporation hires an Enneagram coach, that is a red flag saying HR problems, right? Like that's That's what we're saying. HR problems. And so you know that going in. So what do they want you to do? Like they're not trying to increase their bottom line directly. They think it will ultimately, but we want our people to feel differently about one another and about this workplace. And especially if you get an arc, like if you get to be with the same group of people multiple times, it's like, this is what we're going to work on this time. And the next time we're going to work on this. And the next time we're going to work on that, and be as transparent about that, Rosemary, as possible. Say like, hey, what we're going to cover this weekend, I'm going to come back every quarter. What we're going to cover this weekend is about this, and we're going to cover these other things. So if this doesn't speak to you, I'm really hopeful that some other things will connect as we move along. And that's the only way to do it, because like you're not, no one is everyone's favorite coach, speaker, facilitator, guide. And some people you just don't connect with for 1,000 different reasons that you can't help, but do the pieces that you can help move folks along is the best I've got.
Thank you, Sean. It was really good. And I think today, as I was getting ready for an Enneagram workshop, I just sent out a note to everyone who was signed up and just said, what are you hoping we'll cover? And then, what's the biggest question you're facing right now in your life? And I think the gift of asking the question and letting go of your, as you said, your walkabout self, as you normally would approach a particular audience, we all need to be reminded of it, because we have been hardwired in very particular gifts, and so we don't want anybody to lose that. We don't want you to stop being Sean Palmer, leading with style 3 and practicing presence with all the other 8 styles, right? And so we wouldn't have invited you to talk about these things unless you were you. And so, I think there's an inherent greatness part of this that, as someone said, we don't want to, we're not a melting pot, we are a mosaic. And, and so the gift of being in your presence today, we felt your 3 energy, we felt ourselves included in the room. And so you did what you preach. You practiced what you preached in the book. And we want to say thank you. Everybody want to just throw your sign up if you heard it in your own number today. Did you hear your throw your sign up? So
well, I was super honored to be here, Claire. I'm glad we could make it work. This has been so fun and so great. And people can find me on all the things, and I just love to be connected, because I love learning, and I feel like I learn something new every day, and that's what makes me and keeps me excited about the Enneagram.
Well, we can feel that percolation. And so we'll put this video up on YouTube and send a link out in our newsletter next month, and put it up on Facebook. And thanks everybody for being here, being a part. From California, I see Kathleen Acker. From Chicago, I see Kelly Castens. I don't know what other places we have represented, but we are, maybe we'll bring this good word to the world wherever we are. So thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you. And the link to Sean's book is in the chat, so you can grab your copy right there.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you, Sean.